Hello everyone, welcome for this Scandinavian study, and today we are looking at the move knight to f3. So white plays the move knight to f3 on move 3 simply to develop the king side and castle very fast as they try to attack and gain tempo on the black queen. But then we can see how black can play for an advantage in such a position. So we follow it up with the move bishop to g4, pinning the knight to the queen, and after them breaking the pin, knight to c6, controlling the d4 and e5 square. And this also prepares us to castle queen side. So after castles king side, castles queen side, we get to this sharp position whereby the first person to rest their pawns onto the other side of the board then will easily blow off the other off the board. So after the move d3, which is the best move white can play in such a position, the other being knight to c3, then black can claim the center with the move e5. e5 simply controls d, and it also gives space for the bishop to come out. Well, an ideal place for this bishop would be either on the square e7 or on the square c5. Better on e7 because it will help us raise our pawns up the board, and more active is obviously c5, seeing that it also eyes the king and pins the pawn on f2. Yeah. So after the move knight to c3, then we fall back to d7, protecting our bishop, and when they bring their rook to the center, we simply defend our pawn and get ready for the pawn storm. Well, this is the typical knight to f3, but then let's get to see some of the major variations in the position. One of the biggest variations in the position of knight to f3 is after the move h3. Instead of castles, here white has played h3 on move 5, simply to question the bishop. Where would it be going? So it's immediately attacking our bishop, and we must needs move it. So the best move in the position is actually bishop xf, and after bishop xf, then queen check, queen to e5 check. Well, the queen to e5 check is subtle, but it's obviously the best try in this position, because continuing with the move king to f1, well, king to f1 is not the best move, but let's first start with that. King to f1 simply moves away from the check, but after the move knight to d4, attacking the bishop, then white doesn't have the luxury to win a pawn, because after the check on b, then the bishop is picked up. So that loses a piece, thus losing the game. If bishop to e2, then still black's pieces are freer to move in the position, and white's pieces are slightly cramped. So in this position, white still has a significant decline in development, whereas black is freer, thus having a better advantage. Well, let's also look at the move queen to e2, blocking the check with the queen. Well, after the move queen takes e, bishop xe, black is okay after castling kingside. The other try can be knight to d4, attacking the bishop and the c2 pawn, and this causes either the pieces to fall back or to make a concession with the king, like king to d1, which is visually terrible. So if the king takes on e2, then black is marginally better after the simple move e5, or even after the move knight to d4 check, because after the knight to d4 check, we are still attacking the c2 pawn and preparing to double up the pawns on the f file by taking the bishop if the king leaves the bishop. So the king cannot go on c because of on e3 because of the fork with the king. The king can obviously go forward, but after a move like castles, then the bishop falling back, white's king is toast. So this is a very terrible variation for white. Well, let's look at another critical line in the knight to f3, which is after d4. Well, this is a slight deviation from what we were seeing, because instead of castles or h3, then now we're seeing the move d4. d4 is simply to prevent e5, and 2, it also prepares a pawn storm on the queen side, gaining space in the center and preparing the pawn stop on the queen side. So after the castles, then there's pressure on the pawn and also along the diagonal. So after the move c4, we play the move queen to f5. Queen to f5 prepares two things. One, it keeps the queen on the active side of the board, because obviously black wants to attack on the king side and white on the queen side. But besides putting pressure on the king side, it also prepares the maneuver knight to b4 to c2, checking and winning the rook if the knight is not taken. So if castles, then knight takes d4. Well, this is a very interesting position, because we must understand what is happening in the position right now. The knight on d4 is attacking the knight on f3, and in turn it is preparing a discovery on the queen on the d file. So white can't easily mask out of this problem without losing a pawn. After the move knight takes d, then we win the bishop, and we see that it's a massive exchange, but the exchange is in favor of black. The best move is queen takes e, and after winning back the piece, bishop to e3, and we fall back with the rook, thus winning a pawn. White doesn't have the luxury to win the a7 pawn, because after the move b7, b6, then the bishop is trapped. So in this position, we get to see that black is significantly better because of the activity of the pieces, and that is a very big stand in the position. Let's go back. If white wanted to win the queen for a queen, then they become a piece down after the move rook takes, a pawn down after rook takes, because this is a very good position for black, and they are a pawn up with the bishop pair, and that's a significant advantage in such an open board and having less activity of the pieces for white. So this is totally good for black. So if all the tactics were revolving around the d4 pawn, let's see an approach when white actually gets to defend the pawn with the bishop. Defending the pawn with the bishop has one drawback, and that is that now white's king is in the center. It means that white hasn't castled. And after the simple move bishop takes f3, then we see that similar tactics can still be played in the position, because after the obvious move bishop takes f3, white's big threat is pinning the queen to the king and winning it along the h3 c8 diagonal. But what saves the day is the move knight takes d4. Knight takes d4 simply attacks the bishop, prepares to double the pawns, but also has a side threat, which is the knight to c2 check. So if they continue with their plan, and that is to pin your queen to the king, then they are positionally lost after the simple move knight to c2 check. Well, knight to c2 check unveils a discovery on the king, on the queen, that is on d1, and the queen gets to be multitasking, that it has to attack the knight or defend the bishop. So we can see there are very many moves white can obviously play, but many being bad. So the best move in the position is taking the knight on c2, but after winning the knight on c2, then the bishop on G is hanging. We obviously can't take the queen because our bishop is pinned, our queen is pinned to the king. So after the move queen xg, then black is still significantly better, and white still can't go after the a7 pawn due to the same tactics that are in the position. Well, let's go back. If white decides to step out of the check, then this is totally crashing that after the move rook takes d, then they are forced to take back with the bishop, and after knight takes e with check, then we see that the bishop is also lost, and black can as well win the game, and white resigns on spot because this is totally winning. If the king matches to e2, then the queen has stopped defending the bishop on g, thus winning a piece, and the queen is still attacked by the rook. So that's it for today. Follow up the study with the PGN that is offered below. Endeavor to subscribe, like, and comment. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful time.